Yes, you're good. On tap at Couz's Corner today, or this evening, I should say, we are live, and I have a very special guest by the name of Josh Neighbors. Most of you probably know Josh. How you doing, Josh?
Fantastic.
And we are going to be talking about the news that broke today. It's the preseason Big 12 football poll, and we're going to talk about that right after I share a word from our sponsor. This episode of Couz's Corner is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. All right, Josh. First things first, man. First off, thank you for coming on with us tonight. And before we dig into the content, can you tell everybody where you are now? For those who may not know where they can find you.
I appreciate you doing that. Yeah, because a lot of folks have not found me. So I used to do Locked On Big 12. I am now with the folks at 365 Sports. I'm on their Crystal Ball College Football channel. I host a show 5 days a week. It's called the Neighborhood Watch. Basically, same stuff you could always expect from me. 5 days a week, Big 12 coverage, whether it's betting, team previews, interviews, conference realignment. We hit a ton of hitting that from all angles. And I think especially guests and whatnot. We have a lot of guests on. Mm-hmm. I talk a lot during the week, so I feel like at some point, it's good to get other perspectives on there, much like you're doing with this. It's always good, and I think folks always respond well to interviews.
They do,
especially when you're hitting content that people like. So we've talked with folks from UConn, we've talked with folks from San Diego State, we talked with folks at the Pac-12. We had John Wilner on recently, Andrew Marchand's come on, so we hit it all. We hit it all, and you guys can find us Neighborhood Watch wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube as well. Once you are done with Couz's Corner.
That's right. And Josh, I've checked out several of his shows. Really good stuff over there.
Thanks.
Especially around conference realignment, man. I mean, I really think the content you come up with. I even enjoy the shows you've done with Spencer, your former Locked On
people
colleague
do. There. People love those shows. It's a lot of fun to talk
you guys work really well together. And joining us, guys, we got my friend and partner. Most of you know, Mountaineer Paul. What's up, Paul?
How we doing, guys?
We had
Josh. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, Josh, this is Mountaineer Paul. He and I have a basketball channel together called Hoops from the Hills, where we cover West Virginia basketball, and then obviously we appears on each other's football shows as well. He's over at Mountaineer Paul Talks Football. And by the way, everybody, our Twitter handles are at the bottom of the screen, scrolling along the bottom. You can find Josh at JoshNeighbors_. I am at Couz206. It's at COUZ206, and Paul is at Paul Mountaineer. It's Mountaineer Paul reversed, basically. So pretty easy. So with that being said, I want to dig right in, guys. Big 12 preseason poll came out today. Matter of fact, before we actually talk about it, I'm going to put it up on the screen so we can look at it as we're talking. Be a lot easier to talk about it if we actually see it, right? So Josh, I'll start with you, man. What are your initial thoughts on this thing?
Yeah, so the top two make a lot of sense, right? I think Texas, when it comes to pound for pound talent, it's hard to say that they're not the best team in the league. And then Kansas State, they lost a lot, but they returned a lot off a team that won the Big 12 last year. So those two teams are where they should be. I did think K-State would get a few more first place votes. Here's the thing, if you weren't going to vote for Texas, I feel like Kansas State should be the team that you vote for. So, if we take about, there's I see doing quick math, 12 other first place votes, and everybody can vote the way they want. But, I think K-State probably there's a bit more in this, but I did vote Texas first place. I voted Kansas State second place. So those first two are I think, in line with a lot of what we think. And then past that, it's kind of a crapshoot. I think that's putting it very nicely. So that's kind of my initial thought at the top.
Oh, so you did have a vote in this. That's I'm glad to know.
Yeah,
that.
Well, at least they sent the thing to me and I returned it. Whether they respect me enough to put it in there or not, they don't tell you that, but they did send me a vote, and that's
I'm sure they voted. Because I heard David Smoke the other day on his show say that he didn't even vote this year because he didn't know who to vote for because there were so many unknowns with the new teams coming in and everything. I think he just chose not to vote this year. So.
Well, it's funny you say that because I posted the poll and I talked about it on my show. And then what I said was like, I kind of basically said, well, I'm sorry, everybody, like if you don't agree. And honestly, I might not agree because I do all of my team previews in July. I mean, I don't, it's weird voting in June because you really want to wait as long as possible with, and I know the transfer portal is closed and whatnot, but you want to kind of get to fall football because injuries do happen and whatnot. So, how I feel in late June is not how I'm going to feel, late August when we're about to get the season started. And especially now I'm reading the Phil Steels, reading the Athlons, and then I'm talking to folks and getting, ideas about, hey, how does he, Couz, you and I will talk about West Virginia here in a couple, in a little bit,
Right.
a couple weeks or so. And, like I learn a lot from those conversations. So it's hard to do beforehand, but I think from a general sense, it does give us an idea of what kind of us as the media at large think about the league heading into the year.
Right. Exactly. And we all know this thing, who the heck knows this time of year, right? So it's all just an educated guess at this point. But Paul, what are your initial thoughts when you saw this poll, man? I want to get your opinion too.
Well, I like that you pointed out the 4 new teams. Something Dana Holgerson said, which I thought was really interesting, that he thinks is going to be a little more advantageous for them this time around is, so obviously when we went from the Big East dissolving to the Big 12 West Virginia and he got into that situation, they had no time to prepare. It was right now. You're doing it.
Right.
And Houston has had time to prepare and recruit accordingly. And that's something I didn't think about. And as far as the roster goes, they've been trying to recruit and been able to pitch to recruits a Power 5 schedule, roster, etc. I think that's important to note. So Houston's been able to do that. I still think there will be growing pains for these teams coming into the league. I don't think they all have – they have a lot of high-end talent, especially a team like UCF. They signed their 4-star recruit in the cycle yesterday. They're going to continue to do so. Gus Malzahn is building something pretty special over there. I think a lot of us have a lot to be worried about with them in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But I certainly think they're going to be growing pains for the 4. And the top to bottom, they don't have a complete Power 5 roster, in my opinion. I think, like I said, starters, I think they'll be fine. I think depth is where they're going to run into problems, similar to how we did. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and shakes out. And until proven otherwise, I'm really not sold on them, any of them. And this is a West Virginia show, so I'm coming at it from our angle, a bit of homerism too. But I don't think you can make a case to me that all 4 of those teams are leaps and bounds better than West Virginia, especially. And when you return all 5 starters on your offensive line, 4 of the same 5 starters 2 years in a row, a running back that has as high end a talent as any running back in the country, in my opinion, is C.J. Donaldson. I just spoke with Tony Gibson, the defensive coordinator at NC State today. Got to talk with him about Devin Carter some. I'm going to release that on my show. But Devin Carter is a special athlete, and I think something we need to be excited about going forward at the receiver spot. I don't want to take over the show, but I do think West Virginia is ranked way too low. Obviously, Couz and I probably have a leg up on others that would be looking at this situation because we've dug so deep into it, especially at the player positions, in the secondary especially. But I just don't think I can't imagine a world now in a one-off can one of these 4 teams beat us for sure. I'm not saying they can't beat us, but generally speaking, I just think West Virginia is ranked too low at 14. We finished last once in the history, 100 years in a conference, so I don't see it happening again this year.
Yeah, and with that being said, you segued perfectly. Since Josh is a voter, I wanted to get his thoughts. Where did you have West Virginia, Josh?
I forgot what I had him. I had him towards the bottom. Here's the reason why I might give them a leg up is that like the adjustment part of this is something to mention because the one thing that those schools have not had to deal with is the week in, week out where you are playing Power 5 teams, right? So like you start subbing, like Tulane's a big game for you, but after Tulane you have Navy, right? And after that, you might welcome, and ECU is a decent school. It's not a bad team, but ECUs of the world are the schools that you're welcoming after that. And then it kind of builds to a big game against Cincinnati. In Cincinnati, I forgot how many games they won last year, but it's an 8-4 team and the AAC. So it's the every single week part of it. I mean, I think West Virginia is a good example of this. They had a bad year last year. People forget they swept the Oklahoma schools, which was extremely bizarre, right? So, I mean, and I know they had a weird years too, but that's kind of how the league works. And that's kind of that's why this league is so much fun to watch, because the games are competitive. And nobody's saying these teams are SEC teams, but, and I always mention this too, the reason why Fox wanted to re-up is because the games are so competitive, which it's true. I mean, these teams are great, but they're a lot of fun and they're pretty, a lot of them are in the middle of the pack. And I thought West Virginia was bad last year, but they end up 5-7. So it's one win away from the bowl game. And talk about the Pitt game being weird, the Kansas game being weird. I mean, you swing one way and you're, 6-6 after that. So I also too, though, I just feel like from a general sense, this feels like a holding pattern year for them. It feels like Neil Brown is about as dead man walking as you can get. It really does feel that way. And it just feels like he's going to eat a bad year and Ren Baker's going to get adjusted and have a lot of time to make a choice about a hire. Whether that's the right move or not, I don't know. But I thought they could have pulled the trigger last year on this. So it's hard to feel good about it. And look, that mixture of teams at the bottom, it's hard to feel good about. But yeah, West Virginia just feels, and their schedule's so hard. Their schedule's very hard too.
Yeah, it is. The non-con is, but when you look at the conference schedule, we really, in my opinion, our conference schedule is one of the easier conference schedules.
That is true.
Because we get all 4 newcomers.
Mm-hmm.
We don't play Texas and we don't play K-State. Now, we do have to go to TCU, and we do have to travel, we do have to play Texas Tech also in the first half of the season. Those should be 2 really tough opponents. And we play Oklahoma later in the year at Oklahoma. Obviously, that's going to be really tough. But, not having to play Texas, not having to play K-State, right there, number 1 and number 2 teams in the league preseason, we don't have to play them. So,
yeah, I'm just worried about where are they going to be heading into September 30th? Because there's a chance to 1-3 team about to go play TCU.
Right.
And and so that's what I'm wondering, that's what you're worried about, because, you feel like a team like this staying locked in for a coach like this, who doesn't feel like he's got a lot of security right now. I mean, it's kind of the most difficult path at the worst time for them schedule wise. It does get better, but you're kind of worried about how the start goes and what that could do to the team mentally.
It's definitely back. The schedule is definitely front loaded. Not only with our non-con, but arguably 2 of our 3 toughest conference games are all in the first half of the season before our bye week.
Agree with that.
So, like you said, we could realistically be 1-5 going into our bye week, and then we have to come out of that and go to Houston to play Dana Holgorsen. So, and even though I feel like we should win that game, nothing is going to be guaranteed. And where will the team's mindset be at
if we're 1-5?
If we're 1-5 at that point in the season,
yeah,
and we'll even be the coach by that point, right?
Right.
So it's definitely this season, and I look at it this way: it could either be a huge surprise, which to me 7 wins would be a surprise with this schedule, or it would be an absolute disaster. 2-3 win season, and we've not had one of those, and I don't know that we've had one. The last 3 win season I can remember was Rich Rodriguez's first season in 2001, I believe it was. That's the last 2. Now we had a 1-4 win season under Dana, our second or third year in the Big 12. But other than that, man, we've always been right around that 500 mark, or even better. Even being in the Big 12, we've been at that.
Yeah, their worst Big 12 season's 4 wins back in, let's see, it was 2013,
I believe.
13, yeah, that's the worst year they've had.
Yeah. So, and we've never finished below 8th in the league, and we were tied for 8th at that, and that was last year actually. We were tied for 8th or tied for 7th. It was like a 3-way tie, I think, or something like that. But at that point, next to last or next, 2 from the bottom, who really cares, right? But my point is, like Paul said, we've never finished last in our conference. I think maybe one time in our history. So it's just, I was surprised to see it, but at the same time, when you, like you said, Josh, if you go into a season with a lame duck coach, breaking in a brand new quarterback who has very little starting experience, we could potentially be, depending on who wins the job, we could end up going into the season with a quarterback with no starting experience if Nico wins the job. So there are a lot of question marks, but I guess people like Paul and I, like he said, we've dug into this so much. We can see the positives that are out there in this team, and those on the outside may not see, but at the same time, we also have blinders on, and that's why I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Why do you think West Virginia is there? And your explanation makes sense. And I think it all boils down to what you said, and that's Neil Brown and his job situation. Anytime a coach is on the hot seat like this going into a season, it usually doesn't end well.
Yeah.
So, and then there have been, obviously the Bobby Bowden and the Frank Beamers of the world that have. Frank Beamer didn't win his first 4 or 5 years in Virginia Tech. It does happen. There is precedence for it. And there are other examples, but I mean, obviously it's the other side of the coin is what happens quite a lot more. But as a fan, you have to think that way. You have to think Neil Brown truly does have everything completely and utterly nailed. And I mean nailed, other than what's on the field. It's one of the most baffling, so far anyway, coaching tenures I've ever witnessed. And I mean, he's incredible with the media. Every single player on the team, seriously, buys in as of right now, even still. It blows me away. The culture, we get told all the time how good the culture is with Neil Brown. And yet, I just can't figure out why it's not happening on the field. Sometimes the marriage just isn't there. Whether that be X's and O's. Yeah. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Even though Neil Brown's perfect for this part of the country, he's from Kentucky. That's very similar to West Virginia people. He gets it. He's really poured into the community. Like, I can go on and on about everything he's tried to do. And I think a lot of us really want to see him succeed just because I think if he gets it rolling, just think about this. I don't know how much you dug into the recruiting class from this past year, Josh, but Neil Brown had one of the most successful recruiting runs in WVU history.
Which is strange considering how bad the results have been and why,
he's really good at that.
And so your rabbi, like you lose an AD, your rabbi's gone. So you look at the situation of your kid. I'm surprised at how many kids he's gotten to commit to the program, which is, it gets to an interesting point. I'm sure you all have talked about this, but like somebody asked a question, if they're 1-5, what do they do?
Mm-hmm.
It's tough because what you basically need to do is find the interim coach that's got really good ties with the roster. Make sure it's somebody that you hope you could hold on to after the year's over, and try to retain it. Cause I mean, you all talked about, like, there are pieces of this roster that are good, and you don't want to have a year where it's like, what happens if they have a year where they just give CJ Donaldson the ball way too much. And it's like, all right, I'm getting my ass worked. I need to figure out a better spot where they put me in better place to succeed and not just wear me down. Right. Like, that's a guy you want to keep no matter whatever happens. That is somebody who needs, you need to keep. And I know the quarterback too. The nice thing for them is they've got some options, and not every single school can say that. Are they good options? We don't know yet, but it feels like they've got options with potential. How do you maintain some of that so it's not just a complete rebuild? And with the portal now, it makes it a little bit easier, but it's such a weird situation because it feels like we're all talking about a situation where, I mean, I'd like to know from you guys, like, what it takes to save his job, because 7 wins sounds fun, but like, do you want to hang on to him because of a 7-win season? I mean, what does that really say?
I mean, I think a lot of it depends on who we beat and how the team looks into 5 losses. I mean, do we get blown out?
Right.
Or are they close losses, 1 play away, which, to be frank, most of his losses have been close. I mean, there have been some, last year we did get the blowout. We got blown out in 2 games, Texas Tech and Texas. That was it. And the Texas game, even if you take the first half out, we actually outscored Texas in the second half of that game. So we played basically 5 really bad quarters of football last year, and every other game we were in it. So it's baffling, like Paul said. And but yeah, West Virginia has never fired a coach in the middle of a season in history. So
well, also you have to talk about this. They don't have an identity. Like last year, I kept asking, like, what do they do? What do they do well? Right.
Right.
And identities can change from season to season. I think the best thing Mike Gundy ever did was the year they went to the Big 12 championship game. They were a run-first defense team. Right. That is not what we think about with Mike Gundy. That is him adapting the style of play to the roster.
That was a good team.
It was an awesome team, and they played to their strengths. And they were, they barely lost that Iowa State game. They got kind of a bad call that crushed them, and then they lost at the goal line against Baylor. And I mean, they were, inches away from winning that game, and their identity completely changed and it flips. And they just don't they have none of that. They don't adapt what they are to who they have. And also too, on a game to game basis, I mean, they did some stuff, where they ran the ball pretty well at times last year, but on also year to year basis, it's not a program where all right, well, we know Texas Tech's going to throw the ball around. It'll be very difficult to check on the outside, and their offense will be fast moving. West Virginia doesn't have any of that. That's why it's hard to pick them. Going back to the poll, all those teams towards the bottom, it's going to be a crapshoot. But that's why it's hard to pick them when it's okay, what can I count on them to do well? And I don't know if I can say anything besides I like C.J. Donaldson, and their offensive line's pretty good.
Right.
Right.
That's fair. And that's fair because, like I said, the quarterback position is going to be an unknown. Coach is on the hot seat. Our defense was terrible last year. So I could see, if you're on the outside looking in, why you would think that West Virginia is going to be a bad team. But I don't want to spend the whole show talking about West Virginia. Let's talk about the number one at the top of it. Is Texas officially back, Josh? What do you think?
I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are wrestling fans, but they've got the money in the bank briefcase is squarely in their hands. This is the time for the cash in.
Oh, we're wrestling fans.
This is the time for the cash in, right? I mean, the champion's wounded. Yeah. Because really, here's the thing, guys. And this, I know it happened last year too, but Texas is full stop. They're the most talented team in the league. And I know people have said, they've had it in the past. Yeah, I like Sam Ehlinger, but they ran him down by the end of the year because he'd run so much and his shoulder was banged up. And, he's, because of the way he played, it was all right, how much do you really trust that? This team is uniquely talented. Also, they're built pretty well from the inside out. They've got a great receivers, but they've got a pretty good offensive line. And I know they lost running backs, but their offensive line's good, and they've got a lot of talent back there. Their wide receiver core is probably the second best in the country, I'd say, behind Ohio State. Now all those guys, there's some injury stuff, there's some quality of play stuff, but they've got all those guys, JT Sanders too. And Quinn Ewers was young last year. That's kind of what happens sometimes. We all expected always to just work from the beginning. This could be an argument for why Garrett Green could be good this year, right? Sometimes guys are just young and then they get better. Will Howard, great example, sucked. Right. And then guess what happened? And we talked to so many folks when I worked at SiriusXM Big 12 Radio. Everybody from Kansas State said this. The game slowed down for him. The game slowed down for him. He said, the game slowed down for me. To a man, that's what we heard. That's what happens with some of these guys. And I think the game will slow down a bit for Quinn Ewers when it comes to being off script, because that's where things got a little loose for them. And then their defense is pretty good. They had a bunch of pretty solid performances in conference. They were the best defense in the league last year in terms of points per game, and they generated a decent amount of pressure. They don't force a ton of turnovers, I don't believe, but we'll see if that changes this year. They got a pretty old secondary. So this is the thing. But I guess the big question is how do they deal with the pressure, right? How do you deal with the pressure? The good news for them is every single game they lost last year was a one possession game. They did not lose the TCU game was the one that should have been a two possession game. They were outclassed, but that was a team that played the national championship game. So, kind of does make a little bit of sense here. But this Texas progression is pretty natural, and it's time. It's time. But here's the thing: this is their best chance to win a conference title, probably. Because who the hell knows what happens when you go to the SEC? So this is their best chance. This is their best chance to get some momentum going into next year.
And I was when you look at Field, I was reading the Field Steel magazine earlier today, and I think it said they have 17. It was either 17 or 18 starters returning from last year's team.
Yeah.
So not only are they extremely talented, they have a majority of their guys back from a team that went 8 and 5 last year.
Underachieved, yeah.
So, I mean, and Ewers will be better. They're loaded at the skill positions. They're huge across the front. I mean, it's time. If not this year, then like you said, Josh, when
for Sark, when's it going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You look at it, Isaiah Nair was injured all last year. He was the darling of their transfer portal incoming class. Probably going to end up being a first-round type receiver if he's able to stay healthy. Obviously, Xavier Worthy is a matchup nightmare. And what's the kid that killed us last year?
Well, they got a kid
Whittington.
too.
Whittington's
back, and they got A.D. Mitchell from Georgia too.
And A.D. Mitchell. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, they're really stacked at the receiver position, man. It's insane. Like you said, very similar to Ohio State, what you see there. And Quinn Ewers can move around and outside the pocket. That's another thing. He's very sneaky around and outside the pocket. He's not a stationary quarterback. If there was going to be give me something to hope upon if we played them was that he would be stationary, because I like playing against stationary quarterbacks. It gives you a chance to, if they've got a high-powered offense, nothing matters if you can get to that quarterback. Unfortunately, he's a guy that can move around and make crazy plays. He did against us last year. Anthony Hill, one of the best corners in the country, not only in the Big 12 but in the country. He's going to really rise up this year and be good for them. Catalone is another guy that I really like back there for them. They're really good, like you said, in the back end as well.
Yeah.
And they've always got dudes on the offensive fronts, defensive fronts.
Looking at the four new teams, do we all agree that UCF is probably set up the best to be successful early on, or do either of you guys disagree with that?
Dana said something funny about his receiver core being the best he's ever had. I just wanted to throw that out there before he goes.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Gus Malzahn guy. I love Gus Malzahn. I don't think Auburn should have ever fired him. He does some wonky stuff sometimes with some play calling and whatnot. Here's the thing. They're a Florida team with a large fan base. Well, a lot of alumni. Now, they're not wealthy alumni yet, but they've got a large alumni base. They're going to start playing games in Texas, which is also a fertile recruiting ground. They are in a place, too, where you've got a coach who was an SEC coach. They're an SEC country, so they can get kids that aren't playing as much, at those places to come to UCF, play for an established coach. Also, they're now offering that in a Power 5 conference, too. It's not the AEC anymore. So it is a pretty big advantage. And I think about they're in Orlando. Like, they are in prime position. And I think there will be adjustment, yes. But if you talk about, like, who just needed the chance, who needs to be in a Power 5 conference, you think about them. They are – I'm not saying they're ready now. And I think a lot of folks think they're going to have a really good year. I like John Rice Plumlee. He's not a very good passer. And we've seen this across the league last year. A lot of guys we had a lot of quarterback injuries in this league. A lot of quarterbacks banged up. And he is not a guy that if he gets banged up, you trust him to sit back there and throw the football, especially against higher level defenses. I don't trust that. But he is a good dual threat quarterback. He's a really good athlete. He's played a lot of football. He's got a really good offensive mind behind him. So if you're to pick a team this year to back out of the new four teams, that is the one. I'm still a bit skeptical, though, just because I don't love the quarterback, but I love their long-term outlook. I love the long-term outlook for UCF in a Power 5 league now. I
agree. I've heard all the talk from Houston people, primarily about, 1996, we got left out of the Big 12 and all this. If I'm not mistaken, isn't that the year that UCF became a school?
Unbelievable rise for them.
And they're already in a Power 5 league. Think about that. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's just unprecedented.
Being in Florida helps.
It does.
Right.
And that's for that reason, Paul and I were talking earlier today, they scare me because they could very easily take the mantle of this conference and run with it. And
look, guys,
or they could become the one team that the SEC wants, or that whoever wants to pick off, Big Ten, whoever, and take.
Yeah, they've got it all.
Yeah,
they've got it all except for the history. That's it. That's all. The only thing they really don't have, and it's not bad history so far. But I'm impressed with them for sure. I'm with you on Rice Plumlee as a passer. And they've got some skill talent too, you know. They really do, which they can throw a rock and hit 5-star receivers in Florida. So, but Baker and Hudson come to mind if I can remember from last year.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. Baker and Hudson are guys that they throw the ball to, the rock. Really good skill talent there. I haven't dug into UCF yet as much as some of the other teams, but definitely as far as for the future, a team to look for and watch out for is somebody that could potentially either be poached or sit atop the throne in the Big 12 for sure.
Agreed. I want to address this comment from Browns and Beers. He's a channel member here. He says, I may be wrong, but WVU hasn't finished last in a conference since the SoCon years. I get why the media thinks it, and I think we'll be near the bottom, but I don't think WVU will be the worst. And that's kind of where I sit, and I think most of us sit. I don't expect West Virginia to be top half of the league by any means. We're competing for a league title. But to be last was just baffling to me. But I do understand it. I do get it. I just thought at least we should be ranked ahead of the new teams, or at least 3 of them anyway. But anyway, it is what it is, and preseason polls are basically good things for us to talk about. They don't really mean a whole lot other than that. So,
I have a question for Josh, real quick. How much do you think just the overall negativity surrounding the West Virginia athletic program as a whole is playing into some of this? The Bob Huggins situation. There's just anytime you think about West Virginia right now, you think dumpster fire.
Yeah. So, and look, I want to say this because I know West Virginia fans have not always seen eye to eye, but I am from Virginia. I grew up a Virginia Tech fan. I actually went to Morgantown. Whenever they played last in Morgantown, I went to the game. Tremendous fan base, unbelievable fan base. They are passionate people. They love, and I feel bad for them because, this is like the worst time to have it happen because you've got these new schools coming in who are about to go through an adjustment period, and you kind of want to be handing it to them, during that adjustment period for them. And it's just tough because it feels like, and this is the case now, football and men's basketball are going to have to go through a hard reset. Really, is what it is. I mean, it's just kind of the reality it feels like. And it's good they have a new AD. That's positive. Right. I feel like Ren Baker is the best part about this is that they're giving him time to, it sucks that he's had to deal with this too. The Bob Huggins thing has not been, obviously easy to deal with, but he's had time now to deal with this. I think the negativity part of it, yeah, that is there. But it's funny because you're so right about the media. Like the media loves Neil Brown. I mean, I think he's an awesome dude, and we all think he's a pretty good football coach too. There have been some weird game management decisions. It's just not clicked there. And look, like a lot of people thought Tom Herman was a natural home run hit at Texas. Didn't work out. Right. That's just, but I thought the same thing about Neil Brown at West Virginia. I was like, wow, that is a match. It feels like it's made in heaven. Didn't work out. And that's just sometimes how this stuff tends to go, and it doesn't work out. And we don't know why, because recruiting is really good, but just on the field, it doesn't pan out for them. And I feel like we're heading towards a spot where that's the case, but the general negativity is tough, but it's hard to ignore it. And I do feel for you all because you all have a great fan base. So
thank you, man. Yeah, Paul and I talk a lot sometimes, and I know some people may laugh at us for saying this, and I'm sure that those on the outside, because other teams and other fan bases go through stuff too. I get that, and we're so close to this. Sometimes we only see what's going on here, but sometimes it seems like we're cursed, man. I swear it does. It's like we finally get something to be happy about in the off season with basketball, and then boom, this happens with.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to some folks, and they thought that basketball team. And look, I hadn't been. I mean, I have not been high on Bob Huggins' performances recently relative to what I expect from Bob Huggins. Mm-hmm. I thought their performance this year in the tournament they should beat a team like Maryland. Maryland was really inconsistent all year. I thought the team with Deuce and Culver should have been damn near a Final Four team, to be honest. I thought that was a really good team, and watching the way they just didn't adjust against Syracuse rubbed me the wrong way. And so, like this year, people saying, "Look, that's a top 20 roster most likely." And if you have a top 20 roster and a Hall of Fame coach, you could Final Four is not unreasonable to think about. And it sucks because, and I was critical of Bob Huggins, but his selfishness kind of ruined the entire thing for them, and it double sucks because it was people that stood by him, players, coaches, fan base, administration stood by him, and he kicked them the balls a second time in a month span or whatever it is. And it's just, I feel for you folks. Cause once again, great fan base, that is the pro team in the state, right? I know it's close to DC and whatnot and Pennsylvania and everything, but West Virginia athletics are the pro teams. They're going through a bit of a down period right now.
Absolutely. Jeremy Croy says we need to finish ahead of Cincinnati. They are a competitor in recruiting. Great point. And that one is the one that really baffled me. Cincinnati returns 9 starters on their entire team from last year. 9. And they have a new coach. And they're going to have a new starting quarterback. But yet, they're picked ahead of West Virginia. That one really blew me away. I mean, that one I'm having a hard time figuring out. Now, if Luke Fickell,
I don't feel good about Cincinnati this year.
If Luke Fickell was still the coach, I would absolutely 100% be on board with him being ahead of us in the rankings. I would, because he's a superstar coach in my opinion. Are going to be one of the best in the country, and I think Wisconsin hit a home run with that hire, but he's not there. And Scott Satterfield, I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I just don't. But he's not Luke Fickell. I put him more along the Neil Brown, Dana Holgerson level coach. They're good,
I don't.
but they're not great.
He backed into that job, man. There's no other way to say it.
Well,
He
yeah.
backed into the Cincinnati job. Louisville was. I mean, they had a good. They started out terrible. They turned it around some, and I think that's why. And I don't know all the reasons Cincinnati hired him, but they started out 2-4, 2-5, something like that, and turned it around and won 4 or 5 in a row. But I was really surprised he got a job after last year.
Yeah.
One quick point I wanted to make too was the last time there was a Florida team in Power 5 type conference, South Florida was in the Big East. They rose as high as number 2 in the country. We played them. I remember. They were good.
Yeah.
And they had Jason Pierre-Paul. They had talent for days.
They had that quarterback. I cannot think of his name off the top of my head.
BJ.
Yeah, for his last name.
He was good.
Roberts.
Yeah, some. It was a pretty short last name, but yeah.
Yeah, he felt like he was there for like 10 years. I remember that.
Yeah,
Are we talking about
as a similar advantage that like UCF, like you get to pick up the scraps from other schools. The Scott Satterfield fit is weird to me. It just like the backing into it. I know he's familiar with the area and whatnot, but you kind of want to capitalize off the energy that you had before. I don't know if Scott Satterfield does that for me, and I could just be on the outside, looking in on that. But their defense should be good. Their offense, I've got some serious questions about.
Yeah. Bagman says, would West Virginia be okay with Jimbo as their coach? I worded my last question poorly.
Do you want Jimbo Fisher as your coach? I'm not sure you do at this point.
Well, there are a lot of fans who do, believe it or not. But our fan base, for whatever reason, and I get it, we're loyal to our own people, and sometimes to a fault.
Fair enough.
And because he's a West Virginia guy, everybody automatically thinks he's going to be a great coach here, and maybe he would be. I'm not saying he, if we have another bad season, I'll jump on the Jimbo bandwagon, right? But
I'll be on the Tony Gibson bandwagon.
I'm not that well. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. But if it comes, if you ask me today, would you rather have Neil Brown or Jimbo Fisher? I'm taking Jimbo Fisher. I'm not gonna lie.
That's fair.
But I still, if Neil doesn't turn around and he gets fired, I think there are better options out there than Jimbo. And I might get crucified for saying that because he's a West Virginia guy, but I just don't know that he's the guy to turn the ship around, so to speak. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Their offense is not. I mean, everybody kind of says the same stuff. Like the offense is way too difficult. Quarterbacks have a tough time mastering it. And if you look at Jimbo's track record, his best year was with a generational talent at quarterback in Jameis Winston. Right. Like, I mean, right. I know it didn't pan out for Jameis, but like still the talent that guy had is not questionable. And the talent that team had, my God, that 2013 FSU team is it's one of the more stacked teams that we've seen.
Calvin Benjamin.
I mean, across, Green, I think wide receiver too. And their defense was awesome. And outside of that, look, once again, like Jimbo's great and he recruited his ass off, but in terms of like X's and O's and stuff, I mean, it's not been a smooth ride at A&M.
Yeah, this whole Bobby Petrino experiment, that could end up being the best decision he ever made, or it could end up blowing up in his face. It's one of the two.
Those two on a staff together is unbelievable. Yeah, just thinking about those two guys, young men.
It is.
I'm not sure I want to send my kid off to play for those two, but whatever.
Okay.
One
more.
Go ahead, Paul. I was going to read this comment.
I was going to the quarterbacks before I forget that we were talking about was BJ Daniels, and then Matt Grothy as well.
Okay, there you go.
Those were two headaches.
Yeah, Daniels. But Robbie Shields says, "I'm super glad we took Kleiman over Brown. He's a Kansas State fan, obviously. Yeah, that it came down. They interviewed Kleiman was kind of their guy. They decided to interview Brown, and they said Brown blew them away in the interview. They almost changed their mind, stuck with their gut instinct, and hired Kleiman. And boy, did that work out well. But Neil Brown, that's theoretically, Neil Brown could have went to Kansas State and killed it. Who knows? You never know.
Yeah, Kleiman just had such a natural fit there because K-State. I mean, they're kind of a version of North Dakota State in some ways, right? They get all these guys. Like Deuce Vaughn is tiny, and so nobody wants him, so they get him, right? Will Howard is big and unrefined. They get him. Guys like Ben Sennett and guys like Brooks and Knowles, and and a Duke Ozama, who nobody was after. Like they've always been a developmental school. So once you move on from a Bill Snyder, go get another developmental guy. Well, one of the best developmental schools out there is North Dakota State. They're a juggernaut, the FCS, and kind of that same stuff applies at K-State. It made a lot of sense.
Yeah. Jeremy Croy, channel member, says Tony Gibson and Doc Holliday teaming up. Hey, not a bad thought. I just don't know if Doc wants to get back into coaching at this point in his life, but he definitely did a bang-up job as our recruiting coordinator back in the day. He was responsible for bringing in a lot of these Florida guys that we had on our team from the mid to late 2000s. Rich Rod, Kenny Evans, another channel member, he wants Rich Rod back.
Hey, he had a great year last year at Jacksonville State. He really did. They won 9 games.
Yeah, we love our West Virginia guys at West Virginia, I can tell you. Tony Gibson's another one. Doc Holliday's another one.
Tony Gibson's going to get a good job.
We should do a show one time, Paul, about all the coaches that come from West Virginia roots. There's a long list.
It's a long list.
Yeah.
We can go. There's several different routes we can go. We can go Jerry West. It's not just football.
True. All right. Back to the poll here real quick, guys. And is there any who are the teams on this list? Start with you, Josh. Outside of West Virginia and the 4 new schools, just your legacy 8 Big 12 schools. Is there anybody else that you think is in the wrong spot that you would change around?
Yeah, I think Baylor's too low. I think Baylor's gonna have a good year this year. Like Blake Shapen, everybody was so high and excited for him last year, and I was like, okay, well, the guy really hasn't played a whole lot, and they were better off when he was not. They were running the football, but that's things like they can still maul teams occasionally. And I think that's what they're trying to do. And I think Blake Shapen another year, he will continue to get better. And so I know they did lose some really key pieces last year, but I think with some of the recruiting and whatnot, like they should be in an okay spot. I trust Dave Aranda as a coach.
And they got Richard Reese back, right?
Yes.
Running back.
Yeah. And then that wide zone they run is just, it's efficient. It can be a killer. And that's when they're at their best. Oklahoma to me is incredibly interesting because Jeff Lebby and Dylan Gabriel, like I wouldn't want to bet against another year, but just I really have a weird feeling about them this year. And I know they're third, but it's kind of their third, like it feels like de facto at number 3 there. But does anybody really feel 100% great about Oklahoma? And then maybe they needed a year to kind of clear some things out. I mean, Dave Aranda is a good example of a guy, defensive coordinator, took the head coaching job there and sucked the first year, but it was a COVID year. And then was awesome, but it just feels like I don't really know if I can trust Oklahoma. Like I don't feel great about them this year. Texas Tech, I feel good about the momentum. I just don't know if their defense is going to be good also. And like the one big game, the really, really big game they had last year when they played Baylor at home was the Patrick Mahomes weekend game. Baron Morton was terrible. That team was not ready to play in that game. They were not ready for that moment. And I've also just got some questions about like Tyler Shuck does not stay healthy. And all 3 of their quarterbacks were injured at one point last year. So I love Zach Hitley. I think what he does is fantastic offensively, but there needs to be a little bit more checking of the quarterback position about like because they like to run those guys. I mean, Tyler Shuck even ran a good amount too. They got to be careful. It's just, they put so much on the quarterback every single freaking play. It feels like they have to dial that back, but that range, I'm really curious out of the Oklahoma, Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State range, who is the challenger out of that? Because it feels like we're going to get one, and I don't know who it is.
Right. That's fair. Browns and Beer says Baylor was kind of mid last year. We'll see. Could see them improving or declining. I'll also have Texas Tech over OU. Tech's a mystery because the Joey McGuire effect is real, I think. I do think there's a lot of excitement there. I sense the momentum that they have there in Lubbock, but there again, do they have the talent yet?
Yeah, and here's the thing that's interesting about this. Everybody thinks like winning is it's linear, it's a straight line. Sometimes because everybody's like, all right, 8-5 last year, and and we like our chances this year. Like, what if their defense just gets housed again? And we're looking at it being like, well, they went 7-5, which is what Texas Tech teams normally do, and now they have to look in the mirror and figure out, all right, how in the heck do we fix our defense? And I like Tim DeRuyter. I think he's a pretty decent coordinator, but like, do they have to slow down the offense some? What do they have to do? Because look, they might win the Big 12 this year. They might be that team. Kansas State, everybody pegged them as a dark horse last year, and they went on and did it. It's just Texas Tech is not a program that has been really at the top of the league. Like, they usually win 7-8 games or 6-7 games, and then they might peak 9-10 under Mike Leach, but they don't live towards the top of the league. And so I've just got questions about the defense and about their quarterback health.
Right.
It's all fair. I'm kind of with you on Oklahoma as well. I mean, I think they kind of stick out a little bit like a sore thumb after the year they had last year. I mean, look, anytime you've got Jalil Farouk, Andrel Anthony, Drake Stoops, and Austin Stogner along with that quarterback, that's going to be a passing attack to be not to be trifled with. But defensively, yes, they have a defensive head coach in Brent Venables. No, they were not a good defensive team last year. They lost a lot of players, though. I mean, they had an exodus for the ages, after they lost the star, which was their head coach, and their quarterback is probably going to be, he's going to be a good player in the league, and obviously an elite college talent. So, it's just hard to say. They can reload so quickly, and in a day and age where it's year to year now, the roster management, it's hard to predict these things now. In a normal setting like it used to be, you would say Oklahoma's probably still another year away based on what last year was. But it's hard there's so much player movement, and guys like us and you, it's hard to track it all and know it all when you cover an entire conference, even when it's what you do. And the same with Oklahoma. They've got a lot of moving pieces. Names I don't know, even though I know where they came from.
They return only 12 starters across the board.
Yeah, right. A lot of names I don't know, but those ones I mentioned I do know, and that's a solid core for any Big 12 team on offense for sure.
We got our first $5 super chat of the show. Outlaw of College Football, super chat, my friend. He's also a channel member. Also a friend and has his own show as well. But he says, Bob Stoops will challenge Colin Cowherd to a live debate. Oh, my Lord. I don't know where this is going. With Linky Boy and DOCF will be Bob's mystery partner. USC Skittle Shitters will flop. Woo. 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 I got to do that right. Thank you for the super chat, Outlaw. He likes to bring the heat. Yeah. He's a trash talker, man. Big time. If you like trash talking, go watch his channel. Jeremy Croy says, I can see Kansas finishing higher if their QB stays healthy. That's another one that I thought Kansas would get ranked higher than 9th.
Yeah, here's the problem though, is like this is the issue for Kansas is we saw it late last year, building the depth, right? Because their first half looked really good. And I love what they got. The fact that they're getting Jason Bean back is fantastic. That's great. But it's not about those guys that we know, because they're going to return 10 guys on offense and 7 on defense. It's not about those guys though. It's about when those guys go down. And so that it's the building depth part of this that makes this the challenge, right? Like that is what makes this so challenging, because you think about what happened in some of those games last year. TCU, they couldn't stop anybody. The Oklahoma game, they could not stop them. The Baylor game, they could not stop them. I'm trying to think, Texas Tech.
They didn't stop us either.
I mean, these are crooked numbers, guys, in the back end. 38, 52, 35, 43, 55, 47, and 55. Those are the numbers they surrendered in the back half on defense. Mm-hmm. And they've got some decent defensive players too. But the thing is, it's depth. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Lance Leipold's doing as good of a job as anybody. I think he's an amazing coach. Jesse Newell will cover them with the KC Star. He does the Chiefs now, I think. Said to me, he said if they win 5 games in his 3rd year, they should build a statue of him. That is what he said. And he's being facetious, obviously, but like he won 6 last year. He won 6. And these talented players, and also I'm not sure if y'all are seeing what they're doing in recruiting. They're getting some serious players in recruiting.
They are.
And so for them, it's, here's the thing. They might go 5-7 this year. That's good. If you told Kansas fan you get 11 wins in a 2-season stretch, I mean, would you not, or 10 wins in a 2-season stretch? They would take that 100%. So they're kind of another example, guys, of winning not being linear, right? Because you just don't know what's going to happen. But their skill talent. I mean, is there a better quarterback running back combo in the entire conference than Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal? I don't know if there is.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point.
There's not much drop off to Jason Bean either.
No, there's not. Kenny Evans says, how many games do we need to win to keep Brown? My prediction is 7. But a lot of it is it's going to depend on how the season goes. Who do they beat? Who do they lose to? And if we lose to Pitt, that's going to mean more probably. Obviously, we lose to Duquesne, he's probably gone. But that's a whole other conversation. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that go into play there other than just wins and losses. But to me, 7's the number that he needs to win to keep the job. Or that could be 7-6 with a bowl win, or 7-5 regular season with a bowl loss.
He needs to do something spectacular to save his job for me.
Well, the only reason I say that is, number one, Western University is $35 million in the red right now. As a university, and his buyout would still be around $13 or $14 million.
But I mean, you can usually find money for it. If it emerge and people want to make it happen. Just the reason why I say that is because you don't want to reinvest in the coach. And I'm not saying they give it a big extension, whatever, if he wins 8-9 games, whatever it is, but I'd want something considerate, because if they win 7-8 games, it just fits a pattern of inconsistency. That's kind of what it fits into. And so
that's fair.
I need to see something tangible, like, oh, this is an identity. They can recreate this. I feel good about them recreating it the following year, as opposed to a lightning in the bottle, type thing, because it's not upward right now.
If they didn't fire him after last year, I think it's going to take.
I don't know why they didn't do it. They should have pulled the trigger on. I understand
don't know what it's going to take.
Stuff,
so I just historically, West Virginia doesn't fire coaches. It's not typical. And which, to be honest, we've never really had one that's been bad enough to fire. Dana was close. Dana was tinkering there for a couple of years. Then boom, he pulls out a 10-win season.
Right.
And keeps his job. Right. And then when he left, I don't know if it was. I think it was kind of a mutual thing. I think he wanted to go to Houston because he loved Houston and missed his days there. And, it was a combination of that. And I don't think our president was a big fan of Dana because of his antics and things like that on the sidelines and all that. But he won football games more than Neil's doing. So,
right.
Eugene Burns, $1.99 super chat. He says losing to Pitt could be the final straw for Brown. It could be, especially after the way it ended last year, where we had him beat. And then he took his foot off the gas.
Yeah. Literal lightning in a bottle with C.J. Donaldson that day.
Paul, are there any other questions you got for Josh before we wrap this thing up?
No, got some football show, but just that are going to be worth mentioning. James Okonkwo is officially transferred to North Carolina. So that's another loss for the Mountaineers in the transfer portal in basketball. Probably have to do a show of Hoops in the Hills on that.
All right. It's amazing how our roster was not supposed to be all that good, according to some, but yet our bench players are going to UNC, Texas Tech, and Alabama.
And one of those bench players got $400K.
Yeah.
I think people want Bob Huggins players. I think people want Bob Huggins players because you kind of know what kind of guy you're going to get.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with one of those guys, with Joe Toussaint. He's that guy's a baller, man.
Yeah. He's a player.
Yeah, he is. One more comment here from Outlaw. Aranda and Campbell stock will continue to slide. Matt Campbell missed his window. Kansas will not sneak up this year. Since he looks hollow and TCU was flashing the pan, WU will not finish 14. And he hit him
like that.
Yeah. Quick to the point. That's a good one. Campbell, we kind of talked about Aranda. Campbell, that's another one. Do you think Matt Campbell at Iowa State, Josh, do you think his stock's sliding, or do you think he's pretty comfortable?
I would invite people to go and look at Iowa State football historically and just pay attention to what he's doing, like what he has done there. Uh-huh. Look, they didn't cash in that 1 year they should have, man. That 7-5 year was bad. But here's what I will say is that they are putting guys in the NFL. Those guys have been successful, and that is what you need to build a program on. And also last year, guys, their defense was terrific. I forgot what it was, but I remember the stat that if their offense had scored 20 points in like their first 10 games, they would have won 7 or 8 of them. I mean, their defense was awesome last year. And, that's the thing is, I mean, let's just say that they paired up last year's defense with an offense that gets a little bit better. It's a 6-7 win team. That's another good season for them. So I think Matt Campbell's still a really good coach. I think the comments about, what defines success in that 1 year, 7-5 was weird. He's still an excellent coach though. I would have no problems on a Power 5 team going after Matt Campbell. Just because he's not winning 10 games, he's not the big flashy kind of season. Just remember where he is when you think about that. And also Hunter Deckers was terrible. He was terrible last year.
You think he'll be better this year?
I think, yeah. And like this is a part of it too, where I kind of just throw my hands up and say like, guys get old, like he might be good. And we're like, well, look who got older. look who learned from 1 year of sucking, and look who got one more year at the offense of being the guy. And he's a talented guy. He's got a really good arm. Mm-hmm. So like, it'd be surprising if he got really good, but is anybody shocked if he gets better? No, they're college kids. They just get better. Like that's kind of what happens normally.
Outlaw brings up the Dan McCarney days from the 90s, which I was too young to remember that, but
I don't know if I don't think it was a whole lot of winning that Iowa State was doing. If you go back to like the 90s and think about, I mean, if you go record by year, I mean, Paul Rhodes did a decent job, right? But you go back and you go to like the 90s. I mean, they've got a couple 9-win seasons, 7 wins in there, but still 1, a 3, a couple 3s, some 4s. It's not consistent winning.
Right. Yep. All right. Well, guys, before we go, one more time, Josh, please tell everybody where you are at today, where they can find
you. You guys can find me. The Neighborhood Watch is the show. Once you all watch the fine programs from Couz and Paul, you guys can go find us wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Please subscribe. Starting a new show is hard, as you all know. So if you guys can subscribe and leave comments, like the videos, all that kind of stuff, it's great. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at @JoshNeighbors_. And you guys can also find the show at NWPod365. Gentlemen, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Paul, how about you? Where can they find you at, my friend?
Find me at Mountaineer Paul Talks Football over on YouTube. Just hit 1,100 subscribers. Thanks to you beautiful people. Obviously, Hoops from the Hills has exploded. And that show's really grown in a really short amount of time. Really proud of that, what Couz and I are putting together over there. Obviously, it's from a West Virginia slant, but we cover it all. But get over there and subscribe to Josh. You guys know us. Definitely go and subscribe to whatever Josh is doing. He's today's guest, and he takes precedence.
Yep. And one more time, guys, shout out. In the beginning, I gave a shout out to our sponsor, Dutch Miller Autos. Go to DutchMillerAuto.com when you're ready for your next vehicle purchase, or go visit the nearest Dutch Miller dealer near you. They have dealerships throughout the state of West Virginia, so go check out their locations online. With that being said, guys, we are going to call it a night. We appreciate all the support. We appreciate the conversation in the chat room. We appreciate the super chats. And we just appreciate everything. Guys, on your way out, please hit the like button if you haven't yet. It really helps the YouTube algorithm. And if you're watching this on the replay, the like button still helps, guys. The like button, the comments, all of that continues to help, even if the live show has ended. So with all that said, Josh, thanks again for coming on. Paul, thank you. And we're out. And Q Country Roads.